Hi guys, welcome back to our next reading, the third part. And before we start starting, I want to say something about today. Today we have everyday holiday. So and our today's Bible holiday is, let's show, the holy martyrs Trophimus, Theophilus, and the 13 martyrs with them. So I want to say something about today's holiday, and that is today is the July 17, 2024, and we celebrate the holy martyrs Trophimus and Theophilus with 13 other with them. So the holy martyrs Trophimus and Theophilus and the 13 other martyrs with them suffered during the persecution against Christians under the Emperor Diocletian. This was 284 to 305 AD. So brought to trial, they bravely confessed themselves as Christians and refused to offer sacrifice to idols. So after fearsome tortures, their legs were broken and they were thrown into a fire. So strengthened by the Lord, they emerged from the fire completely unharmed. So they was thrown in, and then they were unharmed. So glorifying to Christ, all the more unable to break the will of these holy confessors. The torturers eventually beheaded them. So we really don't know. And if you want to know more about holidays, so Bible holidays, just check our website. So this was my first one. I hope I will be better in this. So let's move forward to read, to study. I hope you can hear me well. So just let's check my phone. Oh, I'm too loud. Let me fix this. So I think 50 is fine. So my wife just texted me. 2 words, enter. 1 word, enter. 3 words, enter. 1 word, enter. So let's move forward. Clean and unclean animals, chapter 11 from Leviticus. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying them, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, these are the animals you may eat among the animals on the earth." So you can see we have here a context. So verse 1 and 2, this is about 10. This is 10, sorry. We have no context there. So verse 3, whatever divides to hoof, having cloven hoofs and chewing the cud, that you may eat. Nevertheless, these you shall not eat among those that chew the cud or have cloven hoofs. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven, hooves is unclean to you. So the rock hyrax, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. And the swine, to its divides the hoof, having close hooves, yet does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Their flesh you shall not eat, and the carcasses you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. So these you may eat of everything in the water, whatever in the water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. But everything in the water or in the seas or the rivers that does not have fins and scales, from all these and from every living creature in the water which the waters produce, they are an abomination to you. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Whatever in the water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. Now this you shall regard as an abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the ossifrage, and the sea eagle, the kite and the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, the ostrich, the short-eared owl, the seagull, and the hawk after its kind, the little owl, the fish owl, and the screech owl, the white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron after its kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. Just let me drink a little coffee. Now all flying insects that creep and on all fours should be an abomination to you. Yet these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the earth. These you may eat. Earth. These you may eat. The locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind, the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. Now by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean till evening. Whoever carries part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his cloth and be unclean till evening. Any animal which divides to food, but it's not cloven-hoofed, or does not chew the cud, it's unclean to you. Every who touches it shall be unclean. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean. Now whatever goes on its paw, among all kinds of animals that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Whoever touches any such carcass shall be unclean till evening. Whoever carries any such carcass shall wash his cloth and be unclean till evening. It is unclean to you. This also shall be unclean to you among the creeping things that creeps on the earth, the mole, the mouse, and the large lizard after its kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand reptile, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean till evening. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack. Whatever item it is in which work is done, it must be put in water, and it shall be unclean till evening. Then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls you shall break. And whatever is in it shall be unclean. In such a vessel, an edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean. And any drink that may be drunk from it becomes unclean. Everything on which a carcass falls shall be unclean, whether it is an oven or cooking stove. It shall be broken down, for they are unclean to you. Just let me check the stream. Yeah, we are here. They're unclean and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern where there is plenty of water should be clean, but whatever touches and such carcass becomes unclean. But if a part of any such carcass falls on any planting seed, which is to be sown, it remains clean. However, if water is put on the seed, and if a part of any such carcass falls on it, it becomes unclean to you. Now, if an animal you are permitted to eat dies, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean till evening. He who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. He also who carries its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. Now, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatever crawls on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet among all creeping things that creeps on the earth, these you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. Let's give a hi to our Asian friends who eats a lot of them. You shall not make yourself abominable with any creeping things that creeps, nor shall you make yourself unclean with them, lest you should be defiled by them. For I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and you shall be holy. For I, the Lord your God, am holy. Neither shall you defile your souls with any creeping thing that creeps on the earth. For I am the Lord who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I, the Lord, am holy. This is the law of the animals and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. So let's go to the context, but give me first a sip. So chapter 11, from verse 2 to 4 and 47, at least two issues related to the animals, the nature of the animals, and eating only clean animals. The nature of all animals is good in itself, because the Creator is good. He did not create anything evil in itself. This also applies to man, whose nature is good in itself, as Genesis chapter 1:38 says. Then God saw everything he made, and indeed it was very good. So you are good, the listener. And I think that because you are here and you are listening how I read. So you are good. The lawgiver said that foods going into the stomach cannot defile a man. Rather, the evil proceeding from his heart defiles him. Mark chapter 7, verse 50-23. He said this when the law of Moses was still in effect. Why then did he declare through Moses that certain animals were clean and others were unclean, and only the clean ones were to be eaten? Whatever various answers may be given, one seems to stand out as especially important. The eating of clean animals forecasts the cleansing of both Jews and Gentiles in baptism to form them into one body, the church. So Peter's vision in Acts chapter 10, verse 9-16 indicates the inclusion of Gentiles into the church through baptism. The earth, then, this is what the line sheet denotes, and the wild animals in it are those among the Gentiles, and the command, kill and eat, denotes that Peter must go to them also. And the linen sheet being let down 3 times denotes baptism. John Christosus. So chapter 12. Purification of the childbirth. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying to them, If a woman conceived and bore a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. She shall be unclean as in the days after her menstrual isolation. Then on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She will then continue in the blood of her uncleanness 33 days. She is not to touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary, until the days of her purification are fulfilled. But if she bears a female child, she will be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation isolation, and she will continue in the blood of her unclean 66 days. When the days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or a daughter, she is to bring to the priest a lamb of the first year as a whole burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering to the door of the tabernacle of testimony. Then he shall bring it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and it will cleanse her from her flow of blood. This is the law for her who bore male or female. But if she is unable to afford a lamb, she may bring 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, one as a whole burnt offering and the other as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for her, and she will be clean. Did you hear this, my lovely wife? Why you needed to be so long? not in the church. But I know you know this because you know more than me. Because, yeah, I was a really bad sinner. So, yes, back to the chapter. So it was chapter 12. We have here notes. So verse 1 to 3, marriage, conception, and birth are honorable in every way. Marriage is honorable, honorable among all. And the bed undefiled. Hebrew chapter 13:4. Since these things are true, in what sense do conception and birth relate to uncleanness in the Mosaic law? So they were symbolic of meaning of baptism. The water of baptism is the womb into which the old life of sin is buried, as indicated by the 7 days. The 8th day speaks of the renewal of man's nature in baptism by the Holy Spirit into the world to come. Circumcision on this day is typical of the cutting away of sin by the circumcision of Christ, affected in baptism. Okay. So, chapter 13, laws concerning leprosy. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man has a scar on the surface of his skin, or a shiny spot, and it appears to be a leprous infection, he is to be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons, the priests. The priest shall examine the infection on the surface of his skin, and if the hair in the infection has turned white and the infection appears deeper than the surface of his skin, it is a leprous infection. So we have here a note. Leprosy was the primary type or symbol of sin in the Old Testament. Sin does to the soul what leprosy does to the body. As leprosy defiles the body, so similarly sin defiles the conscience with dead works. So those the priest should examine. Sorry, my English is bad. I have so much trouble with some words, but I hope you can understand. Examine. Okay, him and pronounce him unclean. But if the shiny spot on the surface of his skin is white but appears to be no more than skin deep, and its hair has not turned white but is dark, the priest shall quarantine him for 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him on the 7th day. And indeed, if the infection appears as it was and has not spread on the skin, the priest shall quarantine him another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day. And indeed, if the infection is dark and he has not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a spot, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the spot happens spread at all on the skin, after he was seen by the priest of his cleansing, then he must be seen by the priest again. So if the priest sees the spot has indeed spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When the leprous infection is on a man, he shall be brought to the priest. The priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the scar on the skin is white and was turned to hair white, and some of the flesh in the scar is healthy and alive, it is an old leprosy and on the surface of his skin. The priest shall pronounce him unclean and shall quarantine him, for he is unclean. But if leprosy breaks out all over the skin and it covers from head to foot, all the skin of the one with the infection, according to full examination of the priest, then the priest shall consider, and indeed if the leprosy covers the entire surface of the skin, he shall pronounce clean him who has the infection, because it all turned white. He is clean. But in whatever day an open wound appears on him, he shall be unclean. Thus the priest shall examine the open wound and pronounce him unclean, for an open wound is unclean. It is leprosy. But if the surface of the skin is restored and turns white again, he shall come to the priest. The priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the infection has turned white, the priest shall pronounce clean him who has the infection. He is clean. If one's body develops an ulcer in the skin, and it's healed, and in the place of the uncel, I don't know how to pronounce, there comes a white scar or a shiny or inflamed spot, it shall be shown to the priest. When the priest sees it, and indeed it appears deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy which broke out in the ulcer. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there is no white hair in it, and it's not deeper than the skin surface, but it's dark, the priest shall quarantine him 7 days. But if it should spread over the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprous infection which broke out in the ulcer. I have no idea how to pronounce it. But if the shiny spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is the scar of the ulcer, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if one's body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the open wound of the burns comes a bright spot, reddish white or white, the priest shall examine it, and indeed if the hair or the bright spot has turned white and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out in the burn. Therefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous infection. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the skin, but is dark, then the priest shall quarantine him 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him on the 7th day. If it has at all spread over the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is extremely complicated. It is a leprous infection broken out in the ulcer. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread on the skin, but it's dark, it is a scar from the burn, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is extremely complicated. I need something on a whiteboard. If a man or woman appears to have a leprous infection on the head or the beard, the priest shall examine the infection, and indeed if it appears deeper than the skin and there is thin yellow hair in it, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a lesion leprosy of the head or beard. But if the priest examines the infection of the lesion, and indeed it does not appear than the skin, and there is no thin yellow hair in it, the priest shall quarantine 7 days the one who has the infection of the lesion. Then on the 7th day the priest shall examine the infection, and indeed, if the lesion has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and the indentation does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but he shall not shave the lesion. Then the priest shall quarantine another 7 days the one who has the lesion. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the lesion, and indeed if the lesion has not spread over the skin and the indentation does not appear deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the lesion happens to spread out all on the skin after his cleansing, the priest shall examine him, and indeed if the lesion has spread over where was it? The skin, the priest need to seek for yellow hairs. He is unclean, but if the lesion appears but in standstill and there is a black hair grown up in it, the lesion has healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man or a woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, especially shining white spots, the priest shall look, and indeed if the bright spots on the skin of the body are shining white spots, it is asthma. He is clean. Asthma. As for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. He whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, but he is clean. Now, if there is on the bald head or bald forehead a reddish-white infection, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the infection of the reddish-white skin on his bald head or on his bald forehead is like the form of leprosy on the skin of the body, he is a leprous man. His priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His infection is on his head. Now the clothes of the leper on whom the infection is shall be torn, and his head uncovered, and he shall cover his mouth, and he shall be called unclean. He shall be unclean. All the days has the infection, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell apart. His way of life shall be outside the camp. So, a person with leprosy was pronounced unclean. Similarly, all sin is unclean in the eyes of God. God did not call us to uncleanness, but to holiness. Verse 9 and 10, a person with a leprous infection was brought to the priest for examination. This examination could only determine whether or not he had the disease or leprosy. The priest could not effect a cure. Christ, our great high priest, not only examines our uncleanness, but also provides the cure. There is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. And how much more should the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. Okay. So we are now an half hour in our stream, and we are at chapter 13. So let me check our live. I think Rumble Studio is not accurate. All right. He is accurate, but nevertheless. So, okay, let's go back. Laws concerning leprous garments. Also, if a garment has leprous infection in it, whether it is a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it is a warp or woven of linen or wool, whether in leather or in anything made of leather, and if the infection is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, whether in the warp or in the woof or in anything made of leather, then it is a leprous infection and should be shown to the priest. The priest shall examine the infection and quarantine him who has the infection 7 days. Then he shall examine the infection on the seventh day. And the infection is spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, in the leather or in anything made of leather. The infection is an active leprosy. It is unclean. Therefore, he shall burn the garment with the infection. Whether the warp or woven in wool or linen or in anything of leather, for it is an active leprosy, the garment shall be burned into the fire. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the infection has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything made of leather, then the priest shall order that the object with the infection to be washed. Then he shall quarantine it another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine the infection after it is washed, and indeed, if the infection has not changed its color, thus the infection has not spread, it is unclean. It shall be burned in the fire, for it is firmly established in the garment, either in the warp or woven. If the priest examines it, and indeed the infection is dark after washing in it, he shall tear it out of the garment, whether out of the warp or the wool or the leather. But if it appears again in the garment, either in the warp or the woof or in anything made of leather, it is a spreading leprosy, and that garment with the infection shall be burned with fire. But if you wash the garment, either warp or woof or anything made of leather, and the infection disappears from it, then it shall be washed a second time, and shall be clean. This is the law of leprous infection in a garment of wool or linen, either in the warp or woof or in anything made of leather, to pronounce it clean, or to pronounce it unclean. So, chapter 13, verse 46. Our notes: leprosy forced the leper into a way of life outside the camp. This way became a camp to itself. Similarly, the fallen world is a camp to itself, with its own way of life. This way of life is described as the old man in Romans chapter 6:6. This old man was crucified with Christ in baptism, and the one baptized is raised up with Christ to walk in newness of life. Romans chapter 6, verse 3 and 4. Newness of life is described in Ephesians chapter 4:24 as the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. So in verse 52, just a little spot of contamination on a garment necessarily caused the whole of the garment to be destroyed. Radical action had to be taken with respect to leprosy. The same is to be said of anything contaminated by sin. Jude, the Lord's brother, writes, and on some have compassion, making a distinction, but others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garments defiled by the flesh. Jude chapter 22 and 23. He seems to have the matter of leprosy in mind, but applies into the sin and its contagion. Sorry for my English, guys. I hope I will get better. So, we are now in chapter 14. So, chapter 14, laws of purification for healed lepers. Chapter 14 in Leviticus. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this shall be the law of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest. The priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the leprous infection is healed in the leper, the priest shall give orders to take for the one declared clean, to small birds, live and clean, and also cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. All right, that's extremely complicated. So then the priest must give an orders that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it, the cedar wood, the scarlet, and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird into the blood of the bird killed over the running water. Okay. Then he shall sprinkle the water 7 times on the one cleansed from his leprosy, and he shall be clean. Then he shall send away the living bird into a field, and the one who was cleansed shall wash his cloth, shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water, and he shall be clean. After this he shall come into the camp, and shall stay outside his tent 7 days. But on the 7th day he shall shave all the hair from his head, his beard, and eyebrows. All his hair he shall shave off. He shall wash his clothes and wash his body in water, and he shall be clean. Then on the 8th day he shall take 2 one-year-old lambs without blemish, a 1-year-old sheep without blemish, 3/10 of the finest wheaten flour for a grain offering mixed with oil, and also 1 cup of oil. Then together with these things, the priest who cleanses shall be present before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of testimony, the man to be made cleansed. The priest shall then take one lamp and offer it as a trespass offering, and the cup of oil, and set them apart as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the whole burnt offering in the holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the trespass offering. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall also take some of the oil from the cup and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. Then he shall dip his right finger into the oil in his left hand and sprinkle some of it with his finger 7 times before the Lord. The priest shall then put some of the remaining oil on the tip of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and also on the thumb on his right hand, the big toe of his right foot, and on the blood of the trespass offering. Then the priest shall put the rest of the oil on the head of the one to be cleansed. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. Afterward the priest shall offer the sin offering, and by it make atonement for the one to be cleansed. Then he shall kill the whole burnt offering. The priest shall offer the whole burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar before the Lord. Those the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and cannot afford it, he shall take one lamp as a choice of portion for trespass offering, all along with 1/10 of fine flour mixed with oil, and a cup of oil as a grain offering, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to afford. One shall be a sin offering and the other a burnt offering, to make atonement for him. He shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing, to the door of the tabernacle of testimony before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamp of the trespass offering and the cup of oil, and put them as a deposit before the Lord. Then the priest shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and take some of its blood, and put it on the tip of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, then on the thumb of his right hand, and the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil in his left hand 7 times before the Lord. Then the priest shall put some of the oil in his hand on the tip of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and also on the thumb of his right hand and the big toe of his right foot, on the place of the blood of the trespass offering. The rest of the oil in the priest's hand he shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. After this he shall offer one of the turtle doves or young pigeons, such as he can afford, one as a sin offering and the other as a whole burnt offering with the grain offering. Those the priest shall make atonement for the one to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law for one who has leprosy infection, who cannot afford the usual cleansing. Hi there. So, laws, let's go to laws concerning leprous houses. So now about house. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you enter the land of Canaan, which I gave you as a possession, and I put the leprous infection in a house in the land of your possession, and he who owns the house comes and tells the priest, saying, it seems to me there is an infection in my house, then before the priest goes into the house to examine the infection, he should give orders for them to empty the house, that everything in the house may not become unclean. Afterward, the priest shall enter the house to examine it. He should examine the infection, and indeed, if the plaque on the walls of the house has greenish or reddish depressions that appear to be deep in the walls, then the priest should go outside the house to the door of the house and quarantine the house 7 days. After this, the priest should come again and on the 7th day to examine it. And indeed, if the infection has spread on the walls of the house, then the priest shall give orders to take away the stones with the infection, and they shall cast them into an unclean place outside the city. They should then scrape the house inside and outside, and the dust they scrape off they shall pour out in an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other scraped stones and put them into the place of those stones, and they shall take other mortar and plaster the house. Now if the infection comes back, breaks out in the house after they took away the stones and scraped and plastered the house, then the priest shall enter the house to examine it, and indeed if the infection has spread in it, there is an active leprosy in the house. It is unclean. So they should break down the house, its stones, timber, and all its plaster, and carry them outside the city to an unclean place. Moreover, he who goes into the house at all while it is quarantined should be unclean until evening. Also the one who lies down in the house shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. And the one who eats in the house shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. But if the priest enters the house to examine it, and indeed the infection has not spread at all in the house after it was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce it clean, because the infection is healed. Then to cleanse the house, he should take 2 live birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop, and he should kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. And he should take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet, and the living bird, and dip them into the blood of the slain bird and into the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. Thus he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, the running water, and the living bird, along with the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the spun scarlet. Then he shall send away the living bird into a field outside the city and make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law for any leprous infection and lesion, and for a leprous garment, a house, a scar, a mark, and a bright spot to determine sorry, in which day there is the unclean and in which day it will be declared clean. This is the way, this is the law of leprosy. So let's go to the notes. The person desiring cleansing from his leprosy cannot come to the priest. The priest must go outside the camp to the one diseased and sick. So too, Christ went outside of the camp for us. Therefore, Jesus also that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered outside the gate. 6 and 7. This was to be done for the one to be cleansed of leprosy. Leprosy may be what King David had in mind when he prayed. Sprinkle me with hyssop and I will be cleansed. David was praying for purification from his sins. Perhaps he understood leprosy as a type of sin, as one possible explanation of the reference to the hyssop in Psalm 50. So in verse 10, the cleansing of the leper, his restoration of fellowship with God and the people, was completed on the 8th day, on the day for the cleansed leper. Many of the offerings previously prescribed in Leviticus were offered. Here again is a type of Christ, our perfect offering, who bore our infirmities and was raised from the dead on the 8th day. For the leper, Christ is the fulfillment of all that was done and offered on that day. Christ is the one who cleanses all mankind, if man is willing, from the leprosy of sin and all its effects. So, and now to our last part. But we have here notes, 48, note that non-living matter could be redeemed. This is 48. For atonement could be made for it. Consider against the power of Christ's victory of sin. The creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. In verse 54 to 57, this summarized chapter 13 and 14. Note here the critical issue in separating what was infected person or object from the rest of the people. Obviously, this had to do with protecting the people from the disease. Leprosy as type of a sin and its note consequences must not escape us. There is good cause for being separate from those who live in willful sin. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Clearly, if one chooses to get really close to sin, to tolerate or ignore it, and acts as if it isn't there, one may catch it. Though leprosy is not the most contagious of diseases, what a disease with which is to gamble. Okay. So we have our, let's go to the last chapter. Laws concerning bodily discharges. Chapter 15. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, to any and every man What was this? Don't want to have a disease from tiger. Don't know how to say it. So, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, to any and every man, when any man has a seminal discharge from his body, his discharge is unclean. This should be the law of his uncleanness. Whether his bodily member flows with an involuntary discharge of semen or it's stopped up by the sin discharge, it is his uncleanness. Every bed on which he who has the discharge lies is unclean, and everything on which who has discharge is unclean. Every bed on which he who has the discharge lies is unclean, and everything on which he sits should be unclean. Whoever touches his bed should wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. Whoever sits on anything on which he who has the discharge sat shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. Whoever touches the skin of him who has the discharge and shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. If he who has the discharge spits on him who is clean, he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. Any saddle of a donkey on which he who has the discharge rides shall be unclean till evening. Whoever touch anything under him shall be unclean till evening. And whoever carries any of those things shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. Whomever he who has the discharge touches and has not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. And earthen vessel that he who has the discharge touched shall be broken, and every wooden vessel shall be rinsed in water. Now when he who has a discharge is cleansed of his discharge, he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing. He shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, then he shall be clean. On the 8th day he shall take for himself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and bring these before the Lord to the door of the tabernacle of testimony, and give them to the priest. Then the priest shall offer them, the one as a sin offering and the other as a whole burnt offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord because of his discharge. If any man has an emission of semen, he shall wash all his body in the water and be unclean till evening. Any garment and any leather of his leather on which there is semen shall be washed with water, and be unclean till evening. Also, when a woman lies with a man and there is an emission of semen, they shall bathe in water and be unclean till evening. So, if a woman has a discharge and the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be in her menstrual period 7 days, and whoever touched her shall be unclean till evening. Everything she lies on during her menstruation shall be unclean. Also everything she sits on shall be unclean. Whoever touched her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and be unclean till evening. Whoever touch anything she sat on shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. If anything is on her bed or on anything on which she sits, when he touched it, he shall be unclean till evening. If any man lies with her, and her uncleanness is on him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, another than at the time of her menstruation, or if it runs beyond this time, all the days of her unclean discharge shall be as the days of her menstruation. She shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies all the days of her discharge should be not her as the bed of her menstruation. And whatever she sits on, it shall be unclean as the uncleanness of her menstruation. Whoever touched her shall be unclean, and he shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, she shall count for herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. Then on the 8th day she shall take for herself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeon, and bring them to the priest to the door of the tabernacle of testimony. The priest shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a whole burnt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her before the Lord because of the discharge of her uncleanness. Those you shall make the children of Israel ungodly because of their uncleanness. Sorry for my English, guys. I'm really not the best one. I'm learning it. Uncleanness, clean, yeah, I think so. Lest they die in their uncleanness. When they defile my tabernacle among them, this is the law for one who has a discharge and who emits semen on its unclean thereby, and for her who is indisposed because of her menstrual period, and for one who has a discharge, either man or woman, and for the man who lies with her during her menstruation period. So let's go to the notes. Chapter 15, verse 13, 14, 28, 29. Cleansing from emission 7 days after the cessation on the discharge came with the washing with water. On the 8th day, an offering was brought to the Lord. Here again was a type of the washing of water in baptism and the offering of Christ, raised from the dead of the 8th day. In Christ there is cleansing, and in Christ the curse of death is overcome. On the 8th day he trampled down death by death upon those in the tombs bestowing life. So we have here also notes to chapter 15, verse 25 to 30. In light of this passage, consider the account of the woman with the issue of blood, who though unclean, but because of her faith in Christ, dared to touch the Lord as he allowed it. Mark chapter 5, 25 to 34. So in verse 31, in chapter 15, the tabernacle was to abode of God. No impurity would be tolerated there. Similarly, we are cleansed of sin's impurity by the blood of Christ, so as to worship God in the heavenly Holy of Holies. So, this was chapter 15, our last one. So, okay. So, I saw we have someone in our live chat. Oh no, guys, this was my reading for today. If someone wants to know something about this chapter or to check something, if it's the same or something else from the Orthodox Bible and your Bibles, if you are not Orthodox, you can write it now down in the live chat if you want, or just write a comment below and I will look at it for the next time. So thank you that you're all here. I hope you understand what I'm reading, what I read, sorry. And again, my English is not the best one, but I hope I can do it better next time. So if there is something, just write it down in the chat. I will look. I can give you some minutes. We are now 1 hour and 11 minutes in it. And yeah, thank you to be here. If you want, I can show it. This Total Study Bible. And I am now in Leviticus chapter 16 next time. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If not, give me feedback, what I can do better. And yeah, thank you, guys. See you next time. Bye. God bless you.